that I feel completely taken and overwhelmed by the beauty of the pages that Ian has put in that book. To read Ian is like meditate. It's like going into another place, and to in a way finish the session with Ian is important because Ian is going to take us to a very, very difficult place, that is the loss of memory. And we've been talking about memory for 4 hours now, the different ways of looking into memory, of creating memory. But Ian talks about the way in which we have to, or we can capture the loss of it. Mm-hmm. And he is going to suggest 2 ways. Okay. One way is to capture the silence, because the silence is as important as the noise. But the second way of doing this is actually to record the noise. And I never came across how important it is to hear, to remember. We were talking before about music and the music as a therapy, but sound. He is, I believe, a sound engineer. Yeah. So he knows a lot about this. So recording the sound, recording the silence, a beautiful thing. So thank you, Ian.
Recuerdo de la experiencia, un recuerdo vívido que explora la naturaleza de la memoria, sinceridad poética, absorbente. Así describe Finlan O'Toole la obra de Ian. Pero escuchen esta maravilla que te he dicho que me había impactado. Brillante, perspicaz, aguda observación, conmovedora. Pero Lisa Maleney nos dice que Ian ha escrito en su libro Monumentos Menores el tipo de libro que cambia a su lector. Con esa línea, un aplauso para Ian Maleney. Realmente coincido con Mercedes, estoy impactado, me ha gustado mucho. Cuando tengan oportunidad de leer a Ian, está lleno de poesía, evoca, invita a la lectura y también, sobre todo, nos invita al reto de atrapar las memorias. ¿Quién es Ian? ¿Quién es Ian?
That's a very difficult question for anyone to answer, probably. I grew up in Offaly, which is in the Midlands in Ireland, so halfway, right in the middle of the country. It's kind of the middle of nowhere. It doesn't have a lot going for it most of the time. It's depopulated. It's very economically marginalized. And so obviously when I was growing up, I wanted to get out of there as quickly as possible. And so I've lived in Dublin for the last 12 or 13 years, on and off. And I've been a writer. I've worked as a journalist mostly during that time. Done a lot of sound engineering and recording things over the years. Work in web design, I do a whole bunch of different things. But mostly writing for the last few years, writing about everything and anything, from agriculture and business to the finer things in life, like books and music and things like that. So, yeah, that's who I am.
Ian además escribe sobre música, cine, la literatura misma. Y yo le hacía una pregunta que se le quería hacer al final, pero la quiero hacer al principio. Yo le decía, Ian, ¿por qué de todos los deportes que escribe Ian? De todos los deportes, me voy a ir de lo menor a lo máximo que le quiero preguntar, pero decía, ¿por qué de todos los deportes, que tú escribes, cuál es tu deporte favorito? Quisiera leerte desde tu descripción, desde tus reseñas deportivas. Y me dice Ian, no escribo del deporte que más me encanta. ¿Por qué, Ian? ¿Cómo sucede eso? ¿Y cuál es tu deporte?
I think I don't write about things because I want to keep them for myself. if I'm leaving something out, like some things should just be for oneself and for entertainment and for a break from overthinking everything, which is kind of what writers do, I think, most of the time.
Decías, aquello que disfruto es para mí. Y entonces, quería preguntarte, ¿cómo se da en tu interior la literatura desde la memoria? Ian captura la memoria y los recuerdos y nos deja exactamente en esa evocación de la memoria, que es tan importante en tu obra y en tus personajes, en la vida real y cercanos a ti. ¿Cómo capturas la memoria a través de las letras?
Well, I think for me, one of the things I'm most interested in writing is the fact that it is a mode of recording. And in the book, a lot of the writing comes out of this idea of different forms of recording, and recording being a sort of aid to memory, but at the same time, sort of replacing memory in a certain way. That a memory that which we make for ourselves and don't record is something quite different from a memory that we have a photograph of, or a sound recording, or a video, or a piece of writing about. That these are very different types of remembering, basically. And so the book is really about trying to explore those different forms and what each one can do, and what are the limitations of each form of recording. What does a photograph give us that a piece of writing cannot, and vice versa? And I guess the most meaningful one in the book is sound recording, and what does sound recording do for us that writing or photography cannot do? So I try to record things in as many different ways as I can to try and find the one that works best. So I could be recording someone's actual speech as they're speaking, and then drawing on that in the writing and going back to those artifacts of recording to pull out the things that I find most interesting. And because I have a bad memory, I think because I've spent so long recording everything that I haven't developed a very good memory at all. Names and everything just disappears very quickly. So I'm very conscious of losing things, and very conscious of of actually what it takes for me to really put something in my mind and keep it there. And so writing for me often involves going back to something else that I've made, some sort of artifact of an experience, and trying to draw on that and trying to turn it around and look at it from every angle until I find the thing that is sort of that keeps me coming back to it, basically.
Tu libro, el título de tu libro es contundente, pero quería preguntarte, ¿cuáles son los monumentos en tu vida, esos referentes, ese monumento? Y cuáles son las memorias más importantes de tu vida en esos monumentos?
Well, so the title comes from Thomas Browne, the English poet, and it's a quote from Urn Burial, where he says, "Time, which has an art to destroy all things, hath yet saved these minor monuments." And he's talking in that about burial urns full of cremated remains of humans which were found in a field near his house in Norwich. And they're thousands of years old, and they've survived in the ground, and he's fascinated by them. And he's fascinated by the idea that time has saved them, that they've somehow stayed. And I think that's what I was most interested in. That's the reason why the book is called what it is. I'm interested in the way that time has saved and not saved certain things about the people in the book, which in this case is my family, and particularly my grandparents, and the people who they lived with, the people that they worked with, their community, which I grew up in as well, but have never been as much a part of. It's not the same for me as it was for them. And so the monuments are those people, that generation of people, my parents, my grandparents, great-grandparents, those people who formed that place where I grew up and really made it what it is today, but are essentially not saved in the way that Thomas Browne is talking about. They kind of have disappeared a little bit from history. They're not a part of the national conversation. They're not part of anybody's conversation, really. And they weren't part of my conversation either. I didn't consider them important. I wasn't interested in them. until eventually I was, and I realized that they were disappearing very quickly, and I felt if I didn't attempt to pay attention to them, then they would be gone, and I would probably regret that later. So.
Dentro de tu estilo, que es fantástico, yo estoy convencido, después de haberte leído, escribí a Laura y ahora escuchando a Mercedes, sin duda, Ian tiene una de las plumas de su generación más poéticas y hermosas que he leído, sin duda, lo van a leer ustedes, y quería preguntarte cómo nace ese estilo en ti, qué referentes tienes literarios, cómo abrazas la poesía desde tu literatura, cómo nace en ti.
I think it's a very slow process for me. It takes me a long time to figure out what I'm thinking, basically. And writing is a way, the way really that I do that. So it might be a case of I have a vague idea of what I want to do, and then, 2, 3, 4 years later, I end up with the thing that I'm trying to say. I don't think well on my feet, basically. I kind of need to chip away at it for a long time until I figure out what I do. And I think it is that chipping away process that what I'm after is a sense of clarity about what I'm thinking. And that clarity is hopefully something that I can convey to the reader. That's when I know that I've got there, that I've got the thing that I'm looking for, is when it's clear and when it's kind of, I can put it in the simplest terms available to me. And that's when I know that I've kind of understood it completely, and or as completely as I'm able to. And that's what I think, what people see as a poetic aspect of the thing is that I've thought about it a long way for a long time until I've taken out all the unnecessary bits, basically. The bits that I don't need, the bits that just kind of cloud things or get in the way. So I keep going until I just try and get the images that I need, the information that I need to get across, just the bare minimum. And yeah, people seem to think that that's kind of meditative or poetic or whatever, but to me it's just kind of the ideal way to speak, I suppose.
Oh. Por cierto, tú describes a Dublín, y lo platicamos como personaje al mismo tiempo. Es un espacio, es un lugar, es un personaje. Y yo quería preguntarte, yo vengo de México y te leo y te pregunto directamente, ¿cómo es Dublín como personaje? Si yo conociera a Dublín, ¿cómo es desde la perspectiva con la que tú lo presentas como un personaje? ¿Cómo sería Dublín?
You're asking this at a bad time. I may not paint it in the most generous light for you today, but Dublin is a very contradictory city. It is a difficult place to live. I appreciate that there are people from other cities who might not see some of that. But when you've been here and you understand the different kind of communities that live here, I think it's impossible to not just be constantly frustrated at the way the city has developed, the priorities of the city, our complete inability to act like it is a city, and to instigate anything that would resemble traditional European city living. We don't have it. It's a very old city, it's a crumbling city. It is, and the bits that are crumbling are being replaced by very expensive places to live or to work, which are not really meant for everyday people. Basically, it's a city that I feel less and less at home in. It's a very poor city with pockets of extreme wealth, and it's a city that is continually expanding into a countryside that doesn't need it. And it's a beautiful city in a way. The people are very great. The people are what keep me here for now. It's a very friendly city in its own way. It's also a very aggressive city in lots of ways. It's a filthy city. I'm sure anyone who walks around will notice that. But it's such a strange place. It's full of contradictions and it's hard to live in, but I've been here for over a decade, so obviously it's not that difficult.
Realmente a mí, vamos a dar un aplauso a Ian porque me hizo algo fantástico. La gente. Increíble, porque es lo que nos llevamos es el contacto con la gente. Y la ciudad puede gustarte o no gustarte, ¿no? Desde una perspectiva visual, y obviamente no es lo mismo vivir que sentir, pero así como te sentimos a ti, y bueno, desde mi perspectiva me llevo el cariño de la gente de Irlanda, y es con lo que efectivamente nos quedamos, con la gente. Y también quería preguntarte sobre Irlanda, sobre los monumentos de Dublín, porque estoy convencido, y ya lo eres, pues, vas a ser parte de la memoria de la ciudad, estás siendo parte de la memoria para tu generación. ¿Cuál es ese, si hay algún monumento, tal cual, un monumento? Trato de hablar despacio porque si no, nuestras amigas en la cabina van a decir, un monumento de Dublín con el que tú tengas una conexión especial, aparte de lo que narras en tu libro. ¿Hay alguno? ¿Algún recuerdo, alguna cita, algún lugar, algo?
There are lots. Unfortunately, a lot of the places that I have really good memories of are being knocked down. It's unfortunate. They're building hotels on most of the monuments that I like. It's difficult to say because it's such a small city and the city center is very small. You know, you walk the streets and they are the same streets. Like, I can't walk around without seeing people I know. Like, I'll pass someone I know on the street if I walk for 10 minutes in any direction. And it feels like a small village, so it doesn't feel like there's any monument in particular that, like, would stand out to me. But I think a lot of the things that I really like are places where I felt at home, you know, music venues and pubs and places where the communities could gather. I think those are the places that they don't stand out to anybody else because they're mostly boarded up or are construction sites or something like that. But to me, you know, maybe there was a club here called Twisted Pepper, and the basement of that. So you won't get in there.
Thank you for advice. Algo hermoso que leí cuando estuviste en tu visita a la National Gallery, hablaste sobre una película que a muchos nos ha gustado de Alain Resnais, que es El último año, Last Year in Marienbad. Esa película es bellísima, obviamente. Quienes no la hayan visto, véanla, por favor. Es de 1961, del pico del cine francés. Es hermosa. Y habla del recuerdo, ese recuerdo de volver a vernos. ¿Recuerdas que nos vimos el año pasado de Marienbad? Todo lo que pasó el año pasado, si es que lo recuerdas o no. Y tú mencionas que a veces recordamos de dónde venimos a este lugar, pero no sabemos hacia dónde llegaremos saliendo de este lugar. ¿Cómo podemos descifrar hacia dónde vamos desde la perspectiva de Ian?
I mean, Last Year at Marienbad is an interesting film because of the way it's looped, it's circular. We always come back on ourselves, and I think that makes sense to me as a way that we actually find ourselves going forward. It is, to me, it's a process of looping back upon yourself and then finding the things in your past that are actually important. And maybe some people have a more immediate sense of what's important, but to me it takes a long time to figure out what's important. And then it's when I find myself looping back on something repeatedly, coming back to the same place, coming back, that's when I realize what the way forward is, that it is related to this thing or this point in time or this concept or this person or whatever it is. And that's how I find a way forward. I think that it's the things that you're drawn back to that maybe slip by you the first time, but you can't let go, and then that becomes the path forward.
Dentro de esta descripción, y ahora llego al punto para mí muy, muy sensible de tu obra, el referirte, y hablamos de recuerdos y memoria por el tema del Alzheimer como tal. y lo describes de una manera extraordinaria, muy profunda, sumamente profunda. ¿Qué impacto te ha dejado a ti el vivirlo de cerca, el sentirlo en tu propio entorno, en tu propia familia, pero sobre todo el entender el significado del recuerdo a través de la otra persona, es decir, de recordarte a través del otro?
Yeah, I think it's been massively important. It's a horrible condition. It is a really difficult thing for someone to go through and to live with for any period of time, and it's very difficult for the people around them to live with as well. It requires a different sort of sensibility to be around people who are living with that, and I think that's one of the things that I found most sort of, I don't want to say educational, but it's kind of what it was, in terms of like how do you relate to someone who doesn't know who you are, but has a set, like, and you have this connection with them, but they've lost the thread of that connection. How do you stay with them in a way that doesn't either is unselfish or is giving or is empathetic to the situation that they find themselves in? And for me, that was the most important part of it, trying to learn how to be around someone who is finding more and more gaps in their everyday life, to have these holes appear where there were no holes before, to find gaps that they could fill with anything or fill with nothing, and to try and follow those different sets of kind of like logic that might appear over time, forces a sense of just empathy towards other people, and I think that was the most important part of it, learning to empathize with people who can't necessarily do the same for you. They don't have that connection anymore. They've lost something, and it's frustrating for them. They're disappearing to themselves as well, but it's trying to still see that part of them that's there and the things that you share nonetheless, basically.
Y lo que escribes realmente es parte de esa memoria, y creo que sin duda cuando leamos a Ian vamos a entender también el significado de este encuentro, del título de este encuentro, la memoria y los signos. Y creo que en la memoria de lo que tú escribes y de lo que hemos escuchado esta noche es parte de lo que estamos construyendo juntos como memoria, pero también de los signos que dejamos para volvernos a encontrar y para volver a celebrar tu obra, que estoy convencido lo es ya una obra realmente reconocida y sobre todo llena de gran humanidad. Un aplauso para Ian Maleney.